For 30 years, Linda Morgan thought she was building a life of love. But while she was decorating the home, her husband was building a fortress of lies, and he was using her name as the bricks. Think about your own name for a second, the one you've shared with him for decades. What if that name isn't on his heart? What if it's only on his liability insurance? Linda found out that her peaceful marriage was actually his ultimate escape plan, and she realized something even more chilling. In his world, she wasn't the wife. She was the collateral. But here is where the story changes. Today, we show you what happens when the safe wife finally decides to stop being a shield and quietly flips the entire board. Are you sure you know who you're sleeping next to? I didn't know my name was being used as insurance. I thought it was love. Linda Morgan had always believed that a quiet marriage was a stable one. There were no slammed doors in their house, no shouting matches that spilled into the driveway, no dramatic ultimatums thrown across the dinner table. For years, that absence of conflict felt like proof that everything was fine. She and her husband moved through life with practiced efficiency. Mornings followed a routine. Evenings settled into predictable calm. Conversations were polite, brief, and functional. Nothing appeared broken. And because nothing appeared broken, Linda told herself there was nothing to fix. She was in her early 60s now, old enough to believe that peace mattered more than passion. Stability mattered more than curiosity. She had watched enough marriages fall apart to know how rare quiet could be. So she treated it as something precious, something to protect. His husband worked in international sales. His role came with constant travel, late-night calls, and a calendar that never truly belonged to the household. Linda adjusted without complaint. She had learned long ago that his work came first, and she had reorganized her life accordingly. She kept her own career steady but flexible. She chose roles that allowed her to be present without being demanding. She turned down promotions that would require relocation. She framed these choices as practical, even generous. At the time, they felt mutual. Looking back, she would recognize the difference between compromise and quiet disappearance. But at the time, she did not see it. The changes came slowly, too slowly to feel alarming. First, there were documents she was asked to sign without explanation. Not contracts exactly, forms, acknowledgments, things that seemed administrative. He would slide them across the counter while speaking about something else, as if the paperwork itself did not deserve attention. Linda signed them. She assumed trust meant efficiency. She assumed he would explain if it mattered. Then came the financial conversations that never fully happened. Questions about accounts were brushed aside with reassurance. Plans were discussed in vague language. Numbers were rounded. Details were postponed. "We'll talk about it later" became a familiar phrase. Later rarely arrived. At first, Linda noticed these things as minor irritations. She told herself she was overthinking. She reminded herself that marriage required faith. She reminded herself that he had always handled the financial side of things. That division of labor had worked for decades. Why question it now? She did not see these moments as warnings. She saw them as signs of longevity, as proof that their marriage had matured into something efficient and unremarkable. She had learned not to interrupt his calls, not to press for explanations when he was tired, not to ask questions that sounded like doubt. Doubt, she believed, was corrosive, so she replaced it with patience. Linda still worked. She still contributed. She still showed up to family events and professional gatherings with quiet grace. She maintained the home. She managed schedules. She listened. She listened more than she spoke. Over time, that balance shifted. Her voice became optional. Her presence became assumed. Decisions were made around her rather than with her. She noticed, but she did not name it. Naming something gives it weight, and Linda did not want weight. She wanted peace. At night, when the house was quiet, she sometimes replayed moments in her head, the way conversations ended before she entered the room, the way her opinions were acknowledged but not absorbed, the way plans were presented as conclusions rather than discussions. She dismissed these thoughts as fatigue, as sensitivity, as the product of too much time alone. She told herself that long marriages were built on acceptance, on knowing when not to push, so she did not push. What Linda did not understand, what she could not yet see, was that her silence was being interpreted, not as agreement, but as availability, not as trust, but as permission. Permission to decide without her, permission to speak for her, permission to place her where it was convenient. Years later, she would recognize this period as the foundation of everything that followed, not because of what happened, but because of what did not. No argument ever forced the truth into the open. No betrayal announced itself clearly. No moment demanded immediate action. Instead, there was only a slow narrowing of space, a gradual removal from the center of her own life. And Linda let it happen because she believed that calm was the same thing as safety. She believed that loyalty meant restraint. She believed that asking fewer questions was a form of love. She believed that if something were truly wrong, she would feel it. What she did not realize was that the most dangerous shifts do not announce themselves loudly. They arrive quietly, they settle in unnoticed, and they teach you to mistake absence for harmony. By the time Linda would finally understand the cost of those assumptions, the structure had already been built around her. And she had signed her name without reading the fine print. Linda Morgan did not return to Chinese because she missed it. She returned to it because her house had grown too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels warm, not the kind that lets a person rest. This quiet felt like a hallway at night, long, empty, a little cold. Eric was traveling again. He always was. He left early that morning with a carry-on bag that looked almost new. He kissed her cheek near the front door, eyes already on his phone. His mouth formed the right words. His body moved with the right habits. But his mind was already somewhere else. Linda watched him go, then closed the door and stood still for a few seconds. She could hear her own breathing. She went to the kitchen and rinsed a cup that was already clean. She wiped the counter that had no crumbs. She checked the mail and found only flyers and a bland envelope, with her name printed too neatly. She did not open it right away. Instead, she went upstairs and sat at the edge of her bed. Her dresser mirror reflected her in a flat, honest way. The same face, the same eyes, the same hair she had learned to keep tidy and practical. She looked like a woman who had done everything right, but something in her felt unused. She did not call it loneliness. That word felt too dramatic. She told herself she was simply restless. Restless people find tasks. That afternoon, she cleaned a closet she did not need to clean. She found old folders, old notebooks, old papers she had not touched in years. She kept pulling things out, stacking them in small piles, trying to make order from clutter. Then she found a thin book with a plain cover, a Chinese workbook. The corners were bent. The pages smelled faintly of dust and time. Her name was written inside in her younger handwriting, the letters leaning forward like they were eager. Linda held it for a moment. She remembered being 20-something, sitting at a library table, circling tones, writing characters, trying to shape her mouth around new sounds. She remembered how alive she had felt then. Not because life was easy, it was not, but because she was moving toward something. She opened the book. The first few lines looked unfamiliar, then suddenly familiar. Like a song she had not heard in years, but her body remembered the rhythm. She turned the page. A simple phrase appeared. She read it silently. Then again. She felt a small, sharp satisfaction. It surprised her. Linda was not the type of person who chased thrills. She did not gamble. She did not make impulsive choices. She did not call friends at midnight to talk about wild ideas. She had built her life on steadiness, but this felt steady in a different way. This felt like reclaiming. That evening, she made dinner for one. She ate slowly, without the television on. She listened to the refrigerator hum, the occasional car passing outside, the soft tick of the clock. Then she opened the workbook again. At first, she told herself it was only for mental exercise, a way to keep her brain sharp. Seniors were always told to do that. Learn a language, do puzzles, stay engaged. But Linda did not choose crossword puzzles. She chose legal vocabulary. She chose financial terms. She chose the kind of language used in meetings where people did not smile. The next day, she downloaded a language app and selected lessons that went far beyond ordering food or asking for directions. She searched for business modules, contract phrases, responsibility terms, words like agreement, acknowledgement, obligation, liability. She did not know why those words drew her. She only knew they did. Linda built a quiet routine. In the morning, she worked. She handled calls. She answered emails. She stayed polite, professional, reliable. She had always been those things. In the afternoon, she studied. She wrote characters carefully, the way she once wrote grocery lists. She listened to audio clips, repeating sentences until her mouth shaped them smoothly. She practiced tones, not for perfection, but for clarity. She did not want to sound fluent. She wanted to understand, and she wanted to be understood. At night, she reviewed. She made small flashcards and kept them in a drawer. She did not leave them on the kitchen table. She did not want Eric to see, not because she was ashamed, because she did not want commentary. Eric had a way of reacting to her interests like they were cute. Nice, he would say. Good for you. That tone, light, casual, a little dismissive. She did not want that tone touching this, so she kept it private. When Eric called from a hotel room, she kept her voice neutral. She asked about his flight. She asked if he had eaten. She did not mention the workbook. She did not mention the lessons. She listened. Eric spoke quickly. He complained about delays. He joked about people who did not move fast enough. He mentioned meetings and numbers and deadlines. Then he said something that made Linda's hand tighten around the phone. He spoke about an upcoming deal, a large one. He spoke about overseas partners. He spoke about how important it was. His voice carried excitement, but also irritation, like he was juggling too many pieces and did not want any of them to fall. Linda asked one simple question. What kind of paperwork is involved? There was a pause, not long, but noticeable. Then Eric laughed. Don't worry about that. It's handled. Handled. That word landed strangely. Linda did not argue. She did not push. She said, okay, the way she always did. But after she hung up, she sat very still. Her mind returned to those documents he had asked her to sign, the way he had made it casual, the way he had placed a pen in her hand before her questions could form. A thought slid in quietly. What exactly had she agreed to? Linda did not panic. She did not spiral. She did something else. She studied harder. She added new phrases to her cards. I have not authorized this. I have not reviewed these terms. I do not accept responsibility. She practiced saying them out loud, softly, in her bedroom when the house was empty. The words felt foreign at first, not because of the language, because of the stance. Linda had spent years smoothing situations over. She had spent years making herself easy to live with. She had learned to offer support without needing credit. Now she was practicing the language of boundaries. It felt almost rude, but it also felt clean. One afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from Eric. A short note. He would be home late the next day. He had to entertain partners. Linda read it twice. Partners. She looked at her workbook, then at the language app, then back at his message. A strange thing happened. Instead of feeling excluded, she felt alert, like a light had clicked on behind her eyes. She opened a new lesson. This one focused on negotiation. Simple lines, clear terms, no poetic language, just meaning. She listened. She repeated. She understood. And as the words sharpened in her mind, something else sharpened too. Her sense of herself. Not as someone's wife, not as the quiet partner. As a person with a mind, a person who could learn, a person who could notice, a person who could act. Linda did not tell anyone what she was doing, not her coworkers, not her friends, not even the friend she trusted most. She wanted this to be hers first, something she built without permission. She did not yet understand what she was preparing for, but she trusted the feeling that this would matter. Because for the first time in a long time, Linda did not feel like she was waiting for life to happen. She felt like she was getting ready, and that quiet readiness began to change the way she moved through her own home. She stood straighter. She listened more carefully. She noticed what she had once ignored. And when Eric finally walked through the door the next night, tired and distracted, Linda looked at him with the same calm expression she always wore. He saw nothing different. But something in Linda had shifted. She had reopened a door inside herself. She had stepped through it, and she was not going back. Eric told Linda about the dinner 3 days in advance. Not as a discussion, as a decision. He stood in the kitchen while she rinsed vegetables at the sink. He spoke casually, like the plan had already passed through every necessary approval. "We have a dinner coming up," he said. "Overseas partners." Linda nodded, waiting. "They value family presence," he continued. "It looks good. Looks good." The phrase landed with a dull weight. He did not ask if she was available. He did not ask if she wanted to go. He spoke as if a role had already been assigned. Linda turned off the water and dried her hands slowly. "When is it?" she asked. "Friday," Eric replied. "High-end place. Business casual, but polished." She noticed the instructions before the invitation. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "You don't need to talk much. Just be yourself." Just be yourself. Linda had heard that phrase for years. It usually meant, stay pleasant, stay quiet, don't complicate things. She gave a small nod. Eric leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone. He looked relieved, as if one more task had been checked off. "There's one thing," he said, still not looking at her. "If they ask about your background." Linda waited. "Just keep it simple," he said. "Say you used to help with some trade-related work. Nothing too detailed." Nothing too detailed. Linda felt something tighten behind her ribs. She had spent years shaping her career carefully. She had coordinated cross-border logistics, handled overseas clients, solved problems that arrived in her inbox at dawn. Her work was not impressive to brag about, but it was real. And now, in one sentence, it was being folded into something small and harmless. "Why?" she asked. Eric finally looked up. "Why what? Why should I keep it vague?" He sighed, as if she were missing something obvious. "It just makes things smoother," he said. "They don't need the full picture." Smoother. Linda studied his face. His expression was calm, reasonable. The expression of someone who believed he was being considerate. But there was calculation in it too. She could feel it. He was not protecting her. He was positioning her. Linda glanced at the calendar on the wall. Friday was open. It always was. Her schedule had been built around his for years. "Okay," she said. The word tasted flat. Eric smiled, not warmly, efficiently. "Good," he said. "This is important. Important. Not us, not her. This." That night, Linda lay awake longer than usual. Eric's breathing beside her was even and relaxed. He slept like someone whose risks were already accounted for. Linda stared at the ceiling and replayed the conversation. The phrasing, the order of his instructions. First, how she should dress. Then, how little she should speak. Then, how she should describe herself. There was no space in that sequence for her judgment, only for her compliance. She realized something then. This dinner was not about including her. It was about presenting her. A stable image, a married image, a human confirmation that everything on his side was orderly. Linda rolled onto her side, facing away from him. She thought of the language lessons she had been studying in secret. The words about responsibility, about acknowledgement, about implied consent. A cold understanding settled in. If he was asking her to minimize herself in public, it was not for politeness. It was for control. Because the smaller she appeared, the easier it would be to speak for her. The easier it would be to attach her name to decisions she did not make. By morning, Linda did not feel hurt. She felt clear. She woke early and moved through her routine with new attention. She watched what Eric packed. She listened to the calls he took in the hallway. She noted how often he said we when he meant I. This time, she heard the difference. When he left for work, he kissed her cheek and said, "Thanks for doing this." Doing this, not coming with me, not being there, doing this. Linda smiled back. She did not correct him. She did not explain herself. She simply let the phrase settle where it belonged, because she understood something now that she had not before. She was not being invited. She was being placed. And once a person understands that, silence stops being passive. It becomes deliberate. It becomes watchful. It becomes a form of resistance. The restaurant was louder than Linda expected, not in volume, but in motion. Servers moved with practiced speed. Glasses clinked. Chairs slid across polished floors. Conversations overlapped in soft, confident tones. The kind of place where no one rushed because time had already been priced in. Eric walked a step ahead of her, shoulders squared, posture alert. He moved like someone who believed the evening belonged to him. Linda followed, measured and calm. The host led them to a long table already set for 4. Heavy silverware, crisp linen, low lighting designed to flatter without revealing too much. 2 men stood as they approached. Eric smiled broadly and extended his hand. His voice shifted into a polished register Linda recognized instantly. The one he used when he wanted to appear both friendly and decisive. Introductions were exchanged. English at first. Brief, controlled. Linda offered a small smile, nodding at the right moments. She said very little. No one expected her to say more. They sat. Menus opened. Water was poured. Then, as naturally as a door closing, the conversation switched. Chinese. The shift was smooth, unannounced, final. Linda kept her expression neutral. She had prepared for this. She had known it would happen. Still, the moment carried weight. Eric did not look at her when he spoke. He addressed the men across the table, hands open, voice steady. He spoke of timelines, of deliverables, of growth. Linda listened. She listened the way she always had, fully. But this time, listening meant something different. She understood every word, not just the vocabulary, the intent. Eric gestured toward her mid-sentence. "This part," he said, smiling, "my wife is aware of." Aware. Linda's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. She did not move her face. The man across from her nodded, his eyes flicking briefly in her direction. Eric continued. "We've discussed it," he added. "She understands how things are structured on our side." Discussed, understood. Linda felt the structure take shape in real time. She was being named, not as a contributor, not as a decision maker, but as a witness. A silent one. A witness carries weight without control. The server returned to take orders. Eric ordered confidently for himself. He glanced at Linda. "She'll have the same," he said. Linda nodded. The conversation resumed. Eric spoke quickly now, warming to his subject. He described operations, partnerships, expectations. He spoke as though everything was settled. Each time he mentioned risk, he softened it with reassurance. Each time responsibility appeared, he widened it. He gestured toward Linda again. "She's familiar with our domestic processes," he said lightly. "We're aligned." Aligned. The word echoed. Linda's mind moved faster than her expression. She recognized what was happening. These phrases were not casual, they were deliberate. In formal discussions, awareness could imply consent. Alignment could imply shared accountability. Eric was building a narrative, and he was placing her inside it. Linda studied the men across the table. One listened politely, nodding at appropriate moments. The other watched more carefully. His gaze lingered on Linda longer than necessary. He was not watching her out of curiosity. He was assessing her. Linda held her posture steady. She did not interrupt. She did not clarify. She did not correct. She waited. Eric leaned back slightly, confident. "This arrangement works well for us," he said. "And my wife agrees, right?" He turned to her then. For the first time that evening, he looked directly at her. The question was light. The expectation was not. Linda met his eyes. She felt the weight of the moment press against her chest. She understood the trap. If she spoke, she would need to correct him publicly. If she stayed silent, her silence would be taken as confirmation. Either choice carried risk. She chose stillness. She offered a small, neutral smile. Eric took it as agreement. "Exactly," he said, turning back to the table. "We're on the same page." Linda felt something settle inside her. Not fear, clarity. She saw the seat she occupied for what it was. Not beside him, in front of him, between him and consequence. The rest of the meal unfolded with careful efficiency. Courses arrived. Wine was poured. Laughter surfaced and faded. Eric relaxed. He grew more casual, more expansive. Linda remained quiet. She counted his words. She noted his phrasing. She memorized the sequence. By the time dessert arrived, she no longer wondered what this dinner meant. She knew. This was not a misunderstanding. It was documentation. And she was being written into it without her consent. When they stood to leave, the man who had been watching her rose last. His expression was polite. His eyes were sharp. He inclined his head toward Linda, just slightly. A gesture of acknowledgement. Not sympathy, recognition. Linda returned the nod. She did not know then what it would lead to, only that she had been seen, and that made all the difference. The question came between courses. It was casual. It sounded polite. One of the men across the table turned slightly toward Linda and asked what she did for work. The tone was neutral, the timing intentional. Linda had time to answer. She did not. Eric spoke first. "Oh, she keeps busy," he said with a light laugh. "Nothing too demanding. A small firm. Very flexible." Small, flexible. Linda felt heat rise under her collar. She kept her gaze on her plate. Eric continued, warming to the role. "She likes things simple," he added. "Family-oriented, not very ambitious." Not ambitious. The words were clean. They were not cruel. That was what made them effective. Linda understood the performance. He was drawing a picture, a harmless one. A woman content to stay in the background. Someone who did not complicate decisions. The man nodded politely. Then Eric did something worse. "In any case," he said, waving his hand lightly, "she's aware of how this works. Formally speaking, she's been kept in the loop." Formally speaking, Linda's breath caught. There it was, the pivot. He had diminished her value. Now he expanded her responsibility. She was being presented as too small to matter and too involved to deny. Linda recognized the structure immediately. This was not carelessness. It was design. The table went quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortable. Evaluative. Linda felt the weight of the men's attention settle on her. She understood what they were weighing. If something failed, who would be accountable? Eric took a sip of his drink, relaxed. He had already answered the question for them. Linda felt a sharp, private anger, not the kind that shakes the hands, the kind that sharpens the mind. She remembered every document he had slid across the counter, every signature he had asked for without explanation, every time she had been told, "It's standard." Just routine. She saw the pattern clearly now. This dinner was not about partnership. It was about insulation. Linda looked up. For a brief second, her eyes met the man who had been watching her all evening. His expression had changed. The polite distance was gone. In its place was something colder, disapproval. He glanced at Eric, then back at Linda. The message was clear. He understood what was happening. Eric, unaware, continued talking. "She handles the domestic side," he said. "So if there are any follow-ups, she'll coordinate." Handle, coordinate. Linda repeated the words silently. He was assigning her tasks without authority, responsibility without control, blame without power. Linda's fork rested untouched beside her plate. She forced herself to breathe evenly. She did not speak. Not yet. She knew this moment would matter later. Correction now would cost her the room. Silence would cost her less. Eric leaned back, satisfied. "This arrangement keeps things efficient," he said. "No confusion. No confusion." Linda almost smiled, because for the first time all evening there was no confusion at all. She knew exactly where she stood, not beside him, not with him, but positioned beneath him, useful, expendable. The rest of the dinner blurred. The words no longer mattered. Linda had heard enough. When the check arrived, Eric reached for it without looking at her. He signed quickly, decisively. The man across the table stood and thanked them. His eyes returned to Linda one last time. This time, there was no politeness in them, only judgment. And something else. A silent question. Linda met his gaze and gave the slightest nod. She had been reduced in public. She had been bound in responsibility, but she had also been seen. And once a structure is seen clearly, it can be dismantled. By the time dessert arrived, Eric was relaxed. The tension that had sharpened his voice earlier had softened into confidence. His shoulders dropped. His laughter came more easily. He spoke as if the most difficult parts of the evening were already behind him. Linda recognized the shift. It was the posture of someone who believed his risks were covered. He leaned back in his chair and swirled his drink, the ice clinking softly against the glass. "You know how these things go," he said, switching briefly back to English, almost conversational now. "People overthink." Overthink. Linda kept her hands folded in her lap. Eric turned back to the table and continued in Chinese. He spoke about process, about structure, about how responsibilities were divided on the domestic side. The words were careful, so careful that Linda felt a chill. He described a scenario where misunderstandings could occur, where timelines might shift, where expectations might not align. And in those cases, he said lightly, "My wife handles the follow-through." Handles. Linda felt the word settle like a weight on her chest. He smiled as he said it, as if this were an advantage, as if he were being generous by sharing the load. In reality, he was drawing a map, a path out. Eric continued. "If there are any regulatory questions," he said, "she's the point of contact." Point of contact. The phrase was precise. Linda understood its implications. In corporate language, the point of contact absorbs pressure, delays, errors, blame. Eric was not improvising. He had rehearsed this. He had structured the narrative so that responsibility would travel in one direction, toward her, away from him. Linda studied his face as he spoke. He looked calm, confident, almost relieved. This was the moment that broke something open inside her. Not anger, understanding. She saw the marriage as it truly functioned, not as a partnership, but as a shield. She was the surface that absorbed impact. He was the one standing behind it. Eric chuckled at something one of the men said. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, speaking more freely now. "My wife doesn't mind," he added. "She's not career-driven. She prefers stability." Prefers. The man who had been watching Linda all evening set his fork down. He did not smile. His tone remained polite, but his words carried weight. "And if there is disagreement?" he asked. Eric waved his hand. "There won't be," he said easily. "We're aligned." Aligned. Again. Linda noticed how often he used that word. Alignment implied unity. Unity implied shared responsibility. Eric was sealing the frame. Linda's heartbeat was steady. She did not feel panic. She felt focus. This was no longer about hurt feelings or disrespect. This was about liability. She understood something essential in that moment. He was not planning to stand beside her if things went wrong. He was planning to stand behind her. Let her take the hit. Let her explain. Let her answer questions. He would remain clean. The check arrived. As they stood to leave, Eric placed a light hand on Linda's back. The gesture was subtle, possessive, as if guiding her forward, as if positioning her for what came next. Linda walked with him toward the exit. Her face remained composed. Inside, she was already moving ahead, planning, reordering, separating emotion from action. By the time they stepped out into the night air, Linda had made a quiet decision. She would not confront him. She would not warn him. She would not correct the record publicly. She would let him believe his exit was secure, because exits only work when no one else sees them. And now she did. The house felt different when they returned, not quieter, sharper. Linda noticed it the moment she stepped inside. The familiar rooms no longer softened her. They revealed themselves. Corners looked deliberate. Drawers looked purposeful. Even the hallway light felt staged, as if it had always been meant to illuminate certain paths and keep others dim. Eric loosened his tie and placed his keys in the bowl by the door. The sound was ordinary, comforting even. He moved through the space like a man who expected nothing to change. "Long night," he said, already walking toward the kitchen. Linda followed at a distance. He poured himself a drink, ice first, then liquid, the same order every time. He took a sip and sighed, satisfied. "They liked us," he said. "That went well. Us." Linda nodded. She watched him carefully now, not as a partner, as a pattern. Eric talked for a few minutes about logistics, travel schedules, next steps, the kind of surface details meant to signal success. He did not ask how she felt. He did not ask what she thought. He assumed agreement. Linda waited until he left the room. Then she went upstairs. She did not rush. She did not feel urgency. She felt direction. In the spare bedroom, there was a filing cabinet Eric rarely touched. It held old tax records, insurance documents, statements that were technically shared but functionally ignored. Linda had opened it many times before without really seeing it. This time, she saw everything. She pulled out a folder marked with a neutral label. Inside were account summaries. Numbers she recognized, but had never traced. Transfers that moved in quiet increments. Not large enough to alarm. Not small enough to be meaningless. She sat on the bed and read. And read. Patterns emerged. Funds moved away from shared visibility. Accounts that did not generate routine statements. Names that appeared where they should not have. Her name. Linda felt her throat tighten. Not in panic, in recognition. She remembered the documents she had signed, the casual way Eric had presented them, the pen already uncapped, the explanations trimmed of detail. She flipped back through the pages. There it was, her signature, more than once. Linda closed her eyes and inhaled slowly. This was not savings. This was not planning. This was positioning. She understood it now. Money had been placed where questions would land on her. Accounts structured to appear shared without being controlled. Paper trails that pointed sideways instead of forward. If something collapsed, her name would be the first one found. She thought of the dinner, the words Eric had chosen. Aware. Aligned. Point of contact. None of it had been accidental. Linda opened her laptop. She searched calmly, methodically. She reviewed digital records the same way she had reviewed contracts in her working years. Line by line, date by date, more names appeared. Not institutions, individuals, intermediaries, addresses she did not recognize. She did not speculate. She documented. She opened a new folder and began saving copies. Each file felt like a brick removed from a wall she had never known she was standing behind. Downstairs, Eric laughed at something on his phone. The sound traveled up the staircase. Linda paused. She realized something then that surprised her. She did not feel betrayed. She felt relieved. Because betrayal implies broken trust. This was worse. This was design. And design can be traced. She remembered her language lessons, the terms she had practiced, the phrasing that clarified responsibility without emotion. She opened a new document and typed a short list. Dates, accounts, signatures, implied consent. She did not write conclusions, only facts. By the time she closed the laptop, the night had deepened. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. It felt exposed. Linda returned the files exactly where she had found them. No sign of disturbance, no warning. She understood the value of timing now. If Eric suspected anything, he would adapt. He always did. So she would not let him know. She lay in bed later, facing the ceiling, listening to his breathing beside her, steady, unconcerned. He believed the shield was holding. Linda rested her hand lightly on the mattress. She had once thought these accounts existed to protect them. Now she knew better. They existed to protect him. And once a purpose is understood, it can be reversed. Quietly. Cleanly. Linda closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would begin separating what was shared from what had been assigned to her without consent. Tomorrow, she would start turning structure into evidence. She slept without dreaming. The shift did not happen all at once. It happened in increments. Small pauses, slight delays, the absence of warmth where there had once been ease. Linda noticed it before Eric did. At first, it showed up in the follow-up messages. Polite replies arrived, later than expected. Language that had once been friendly became careful, professional, distant. Eric complained about it over breakfast. "They're dragging their feet," he said, scrolling through his phone. "It's inefficient." Linda buttered her toast. She did not respond. A few days later, Eric mentioned that one of the overseas contacts had requested additional documentation. "Nothing alarming," he said, "just procedural." Linda recognized the tone. This was not procedure. This was scrutiny. She remembered the man across the table, the one who had watched her longer than necessary, the one who had asked the single question Eric could not deflect. Respect, Linda knew, did not disappear loudly. It withdrew. Eric paced the living room one evening, phone pressed to his ear, voice tight. He spoke in controlled phrases, repeating himself more than usual. "Yes, of course, I understand," he said. "That won't be an issue." When he hung up, he exhaled sharply. "They're being overly cautious," he said. "It's unnecessary." Unnecessary. Linda looked up from her book. "Why do you think that is?" she asked. "Different business culture," he said. "They like to slow things down." Linda nodded. She did not argue. That night, she opened her laptop again. She reviewed the notes she had taken, the documents she had copied, the phrases she had practiced. She thought about timing and about intention. Then she did something deliberate. She wrote an email. Not long, not emotional. She addressed it to the contact whose eyes had not looked away at the table. She wrote in Chinese. The tone was respectful, clear, precise. She identified herself without embellishment. She stated her relationship without leaning on it. Then she clarified one essential point. She had not authorized any agreements discussed at the dinner. She had not reviewed or approved the structures referenced. Her name had appeared without her consent. She ended with a single sentence. She would be willing to clarify her position if needed. Nothing more. Linda read the message twice. Then she sent it. She did not feel nervous. She felt aligned. The response did not come immediately. When it did, it was brief, courteous. It acknowledged receipt. It thanked her for the clarification. No reassurance, no apology, just recognition. The following week, Eric's tone changed. He stopped joking about delays. He stopped sounding certain. He began asking questions that did not have answers yet. They want to review internal procedures, he said one evening. It's unusual. Linda nodded. They're thorough, she said. Eric frowned. The word did not comfort him. A few days later, he mentioned that the overseas team wanted to adjust the timeline, to re-evaluate certain responsibilities. They're being overly cautious again, he said. Linda looked at him steadily. Caution isn't always a bad thing, she said. He did not reply. At night, Linda lay awake listening to the house settle. She thought about how power shifts rarely announce themselves. They move quietly. They begin with attention, and they end with consequence. The man who had watched her at the table had not intervened. He had not challenged Eric publicly. He had done something far more decisive. He had started to listen, and now others were listening too. Linda closed her eyes. She knew the next step would not come from her. It would come from the system Eric trusted to protect him. And systems, once alerted, do not forget. Linda called May on a Tuesday morning. Not because she wanted comfort, because she wanted structure. She waited until Eric had left for work. He walked out with his usual speed, a quick kiss on the cheek, his mind already elsewhere. The door clicked shut. The house held the sound for a moment, then released it. Linda stood in the kitchen, phone in her hand, and looked at the empty chair across the table. For years, she had made that emptiness feel normal. Today, she let it feel like what it was, a space where decisions had been made without her. She dialed. May answered on the second ring. Her voice was steady, not warm, not cold, practical. Linda, she said, is it finally time? Linda did not argue with the word, finally. Yes, she said. There was a short pause. Tell me only what you know, May said, not what you suspect. Linda exhaled. She described the dinner in simple pieces, the switch to Chinese, the repeated phrases, the way Eric had spoken of her as though she were both uninvolved and responsible. May asked one question. Did he say you were aware? Yes. Did he say you were aligned? Yes. Did he assign you as point of contact? Yes. May's breath was quiet on the line. Okay, she said. Now listen carefully. Linda held the phone tighter. May's words were blunt. Do not confront him. Not yet. Linda's jaw tightened. May continued. Do not threaten. Do not argue. Do not announce that you know. People like him move assets when they feel heat. Linda stared out the window at the street. A delivery truck rolled past. A neighbor walked a dog. Ordinary life moving as if nothing had shifted. May's voice remained even. You are not going to win this by being right in the moment, she said. You win by being right on paper. Right on paper. Linda swallowed. May said it again, slower. Don't feel it yet. File it. Linda closed her eyes. The sentence landed hard. Not because it was harsh, because it was true. Linda had spent her life being reasonable. She had avoided conflict by staying calm. She had believed calmness was strength. May was offering her a different kind of strength. A colder one. A safer one. Here's what we do, May said. We build a timeline. Linda picked up a pen and paper. May spoke in steps. Write down dates. The dinner. The documents he asked you to sign. Any account statements you can access. Any emails. Any messages. Any text notes that show you were kept out of decisions. Linda wrote quickly. Her handwriting stayed neat. Her hand did not shake. May continued. Then we pull records. Financial, communication, anything that shows a pattern. Pattern. Linda felt her chest tighten again. May's tone did not change. This is not about one bad night, May said. This is about structure. If he used your name as cover, we prove it. Linda looked down at her notes. Cover. That was the word. She had been cover. May paused. Tell me something, she said. Do you have copies? Linda hesitated. Yes, she said. I saved what I could. Good, May replied, immediate. Keep them off the shared computer, off any device he can access. Cloud storage with a password he doesn't know. Linda nodded, even though May could not see her. May added, and don't change behavior in a way he can notice. Keep your routine. Be normal. Be boring. Be boring. Linda almost smiled. She had been boring for years. This time, boring would be useful. After they ended the call, Linda did not sit down. She moved, not hurried, purposeful. She pulled out a box from the closet and labeled it with plain words: household, taxes, receipts. Inside, she began placing copies, account summaries, email, printouts, notes with dates. She created a second folder on her laptop, hidden under a name no one would click. She saved scans, screenshots, statements. Then she opened her email draft, the message she had sent in Chinese. She reread it. It was calm. It was factual. It contained the one thing she needed most: a clear record that she did not consent. Linda forwarded a copy to an address May provided, a neutral, legal intake account. No names, no identifiers. She then printed the reply she had received. Short, polite, confirming. It acknowledged her clarification. That mattered. It meant someone outside her marriage had heard her. And in systems that valued responsibility, being heard changed everything. That evening, Eric came home late. He looked tired. His smile was thinner. He kissed Linda's cheek and went straight to the kitchen. Long day, he said. Linda poured him water. Eat something, she said, gentle. Eric sighed. They're asking for more review, he muttered. It's annoying. Linda nodded. What kind of review? She asked. Eric waved a hand. Internal checks, he said. Nothing serious. Nothing serious. Linda kept her face soft. She asked one more question. Do they need anything from me? Eric looked up sharply. For a brief second, something flickered behind his eyes. Suspicion. Then he smiled. No, he said quickly. Not yet. Not yet. Linda heard the words as if they had been spoken in bright light. Not yet meant. There could be. Not yet meant. He was still planning. Linda set a plate in front of him. Okay, she said. Her voice was calm. Her hands were steady. Her heart was steady. She was no longer reacting. She was documenting. Later that night, when Eric fell asleep, Linda got out of bed and went to the small desk in the guest room. She opened her notebook. She wrote the date. She wrote what he had said. She wrote the exact phrases. Then she closed the notebook and placed it back in the box. She returned to bed. She lay down beside him. And for the first time since the dinner, Linda felt something like peace. Not the old peace, not the peace of ignoring, a new kind, the peace of knowing, the peace of having a plan. Silence was no longer something that happened to her. Silence was something she used. The first notice did not arrive at the house. It arrived at Eric's office. Linda knew something had shifted when he came home earlier than usual on a Thursday afternoon. His steps were faster. His jacket remained on. He did not go straight to the kitchen. He stood in the living room as if the furniture had been rearranged while he was gone. "They've paused the process," he said. Paused. The word was meant to sound temporary. Linda set down the dish towel and waited. "They want to review internal responsibility assignments," Eric continued. "Just to be thorough." "Thorough." Linda nodded. "That sounds reasonable," she said. Eric looked at her sharply. For a moment, it seemed he might ask something. Instead, he exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. "It's inconvenient," he said, "but it'll pass." It would not. Over the next weeks, the changes multiplied. Requests arrived in writing. Clarifications were required. Questions were asked that could not be deflected with confidence or charm. Eric began spending evenings on his laptop, speaking less, frowning more. His calls grew shorter. His tone lost its certainty. Linda observed without comment. She had already done her part. The external review expanded. What had been framed as a routine pause became a formal inquiry. Eric stopped using the word pause. He started saying process. Process meant documentation. Documentation meant exposure. One afternoon, Eric asked Linda if she remembered signing a particular document. She did. "Yes," she said calmly. "You said it was standard." He hesitated. "They're asking why your name appears there," he said. Linda met his eyes. "I asked you the same thing once," she replied. The silence between them was heavy. A week later, Eric's company placed him on administrative leave. The language was polite, temporary, neutral. The impact was not. Linda learned of it when he told her at dinner, his voice carefully controlled. "They need time," he said. She nodded. Time had arrived. The legal separation followed with less drama than she had expected. Papers were filed. Accounts were frozen, then examined. Structures that had once protected Eric now demanded clarity. Linda's documentation spoke for her. Her timeline held. Her silence had preserved credibility. The assets he had assumed were safely obscured were not. They were traceable. The final settlement took months. Linda moved through it steadily, supported by facts rather than emotion. She did not gloat. She did not accuse. She corrected the record. When the divorce was finalized, the house felt lighter, not emptier, clearer. Weeks later, Linda received an email from an unfamiliar address. It was brief, respectful. It referenced her earlier message, her clarity, her restraint. The overseas company was restructuring its advisory approach. They were seeking external consultation. They asked if she would consider a role, not as a spouse, as a professional. Linda read the message twice. She did not rush to reply. That evening, she walked through her home slowly. She touched the back of the chair where she had once sat quietly. She opened drawers that no longer felt guarded. She thought of the woman she had been at that dinner table, silent, watching, understanding. She sat at her desk and typed her response. She wrote in Chinese. She introduced herself by name, by experience, by capability. She did not mention her marriage. She pressed send. Linda closed her laptop and leaned back. Nothing dramatic followed. No speeches, no apologies, no revenge, just alignment, the kind built on truth. Months later, Linda stood in a new office space, not large, not flashy, functional. She looked out the window and felt something settle inside her, not triumph, balance. She had not raised her voice. She had not demanded justice. She'd not exposed anyone publicly. She had simply refused to carry what was not hers. In the end, that refusal changed everything. Linda Morgan had once believed silence meant safety. Now she knew better. Silence, when chosen, could also mean control. And control, when grounded in truth, could quietly flip the entire board. Linda did not destroy him. She did something far worse. She stepped aside. And when the questions came, when responsibility was demanded, when signatures were examined, there was nowhere left for him to hide. Because for the first time in their marriage, Linda did not protect him. She protected the truth.